Hey guys, and welcome back to the No Chest Challenge. I took a bit of time off over the holiday season, so it's been a little while since I uploaded part 1 of this playthrough. So if you don't remember, I'm trying to beat the game without using chests in any way. This means that I can't loot chests or store items in them. In the last video, I managed to make my way through pre-hard mode and beat the wall of flesh with these restrictions applied. So now, it's time to try and beat hard mode. Like most playthroughs, I started off by smashing some demon altars in order to spawn hard mode ore into my world. With this dangerous task complete, I now had to upgrade my pickaxe so that I'd be able to start mining these new ores. After carefully collecting some obsidian and hellstone, I was able to craft a molten pickaxe, enabling me to break the first tier of hard mode ore. After making my way all the way up to titanium, I used some splunker potions that I'd been saving to collect up as much ore as I could. This way, I'd be able to craft my first set of hard mode armor. With my protective suit produced, next I set off to obtain a weapon upgrade. For this playthrough, I decided to settle on the mage class, seeing as I wouldn't have to collect or craft ammo that would take up precious inventory space. Using this logic, I probably should have gone for the melee class, but I'm not a huge fan of it in vanilla Terraria, so mage it was, even if I did have to deal with mana potions. For my first hard mode weapon, I settled on the crystal serpent because I had already procured some high-end fishing gear in the previous episode. After spending a good amount of time fishing in the hollow, I began to worry that I would not be able to get the weapon with the amount of materials I had. But by some stroke of luck, with my final piece of bait, I managed to fish up the wand. With my transition to the mage class complete, I next wanted to obtain the ever-powerful mana flower so that I wouldn't have to worry about drinking potions. After a quick trip to the jungle, I was able to collect a nature's gift, which back at base I used to craft the accessory that I was after. Before fighting my first hard mode boss, I had one final upgrade that I wanted to make, and this was to my vertical movement. By that, I mean I wanted to get some wings. Like most of my playthroughs, first I farmed for some pixie dust, and then I climbed up into the sky to collect some souls of flight. With the ability of flight obtained, I now felt ready for some bosses, so I got in bed and waited for the next night. Before I could spawn any mechanical bosses, however, I got the message that there was going to be a terrible night. It appeared that the twins were just as ready to fight as I was. As the optical duo approached, I quickly consumed some buffs and then began to fight. At first, the slow-moving projectiles that my weapon fired made it hard for me to hit the bosses, but once I got my aim figured out, I began dealing some significant damage. With Spaz's health reduced to half, he let out a roar and performed his transformation ritual. On the one hand, Spaz's second phase was quite a bit more deadly than his first, and could potentially lead to my defeat, but on the other hand, his straightforward dashing made it quite a bit easier for me to hit him. So although I had to put more effort into dodging, before long I had taken Spaz to critical health. Right before his defeat, however, Spaz got a couple of damaging hits on me, dropping my health down to around half. Knowing that this put me in a dangerous situation, I had to be extra careful in my now one-on-one fight with Retinizer. With my health recovering and his health dropping, like his twin, Retinizer blew off his outer layer, revealing a secret weapon concealed within. Knowing that this powerful laser was capable of ending the fight in an instant, I gave everything I had into damaging the boss and avoiding his shots. Unable to keep up with my attacks any longer, Retinizer burst into pieces, marking my first victory of hard mode. With the twins defeated, I now had access to Souls of Sight, which I could use to craft a rainbow rod, one of my favorite weapons in the game. So I set off to collect the necessary materials, and once I had them, I made myself the weapon. Getting a bad modifier, I decided to expand my glorious wooden tower to house more NPCs so that I could get the Goblin Tinkerer for reforging. Now armed with a deadly rainbow rod, I decided it was time to fight Skeletron Prime. So as night fell, once again, I crafted a mechanical skull and summoned the boss. The homing and piercing capabilities of the rainbow rod meant that I could focus on dodging while the weapon targeted the boss. This, combined with my solid mobility items, allowed me to stay one step ahead of Prime for the majority of the fight. There were a few times where his arms managed to catch up with me, but with the way my weapon worked, before long, all of the boss's arms were destroyed. With his primary offensive capabilities gone, Prime didn't stand much of a chance, and before long, I had defeated him. Not having much of a use for his drops at this time, I decided to move right along to the destroyer. Before fighting the mechanical worm, however, I began the construction of a second, much higher platform that would allow me to better avoid the destroyer's attacks. With the completion of this platform, all that I had left to do now was wait. As dusk arrived, I quickly prepared myself for the fight and then summoned the boss. At first, I wasn't quite sure which of my weapons would be the most effective against the worm, but after a bit of testing, I decided to continue continue using the Rainbow Rod. Not only would it deal good damage to the worm, but its homing abilities would make quick work of the probes that the destroyer spawned. Without having to worry about the probes, all I really had to do was avoid as many lasers as I could. And soon, thanks to the high damage output of my weapon, the destroyer, much like the two mech bosses before him, was defeated. Now that I had collected all 3 mechanical souls, as well as a good bit of hollowed bars, I crafted myself an upgraded pickaxe, as well as the new set of armor. Next, it was time to take a trip to the jungle. After exploring around in the underground for a bit, I managed to find a Plantera bulb, so I began to dig out a large area around it that would make for a good boss arena. Once I felt that the arena was suitable, I made some final preparations, and then I broke the bulb, spawning the plant to face me. As Plantera began her attack, my Rainbow Rod began shredding through her health, and before long, the fight progressed to Phase 2. Utilizing the homing capabilities of the Rainbow Rod once again, I began to chip away at the many damaging vines that now surrounded the plant. Because of the sheer number of vines, I began to take some serious damage and started to worry that I would not be able to win this fight. But I managed to hold on, and before long, I was able to clear out enough of the vines to get the fight under control, allowing me to once again focus on the plant herself. With her defenses dwindling, Plantera began losing health fast, and before long, I managed to claim victory. Opening the treasure bag, I was rewarded with a wasp gun, which I had never really used before, so I decided to go for it. Next, I decided to fight Queen Bee while I was still in the jungle, in order to get the Hive Pack, which at the time I thought would be a buff for the wasp gun. After finishing the playthrough, I looked it up, and it turns out that the Hive Pack actually has no effect on the wasp gun, so this pretty much was just a wasted accessory slot for the majority of my time. But whatever, at least I learned something new. Now that I had access to ectoplasm, I set out to upgrade my armor for the final time in the playthrough. First, I explored around the underground jungle, mining up the chlorophyte that I would need. While I was there, I also managed to find the jungle temple, so I began clearing out the traps inside, making it easier to traverse for when I was ready to fight Golem. After I'd successfully disarmed the temple and mined up enough chlorophyte, I next set off to the now much more dangerous dungeon, where I would be able to collect ectoplasm. Unfortunately, I didn't end up getting any of the wands that sometimes drop from the post-Plantera dungeon, but I wasn't too worried about it, because I still wanted to try out the wasp gun against some more foes. And I did manage to get a black belt, so that was cool, I guess. With my Spectre armor finally obtained, I returned to the jungle once again, this time to fight Golem. Once I arrived at Golem's chamber, I approached the altar and inserted a power cell, summoning the boss. Because Golem doesn't move much, he was a perfect target for my new wasps. This, combined with the set bonus of my Spectre armor, managed to deal some pretty insane DPS, and before long, Golem's fists and body were destroyed, with his head now flying around the room, shooting lasers at me. I had to be careful to dodge his attacks, but for the most part, the fight went well. Right before Golem was defeated, however, I managed to make a mistake and got hit quite a few times, dropping my health to around a quarter. But even this wasn't enough for Golem to win, and after a few more seconds, my swarms of bees overwhelmed the boss, and Golem exploded into a pile of loot. With my final jungle foe defeated, I now set my sights on the lunatic cultist. As I arrived at the dungeon, the cultists were already waiting for me, so using my wasp gun, I quickly dealt with the lowly devouts and began to battle with their leader. Thanks to the homing capabilities of my wasps, I didn't really have to worry about aiming. Instead, I focused on outrunning the attacks that were thrown at me. As the battle continued though, a few stray spells started to land, dealing pretty significant damage to me, and as the battle progressed closer to its end, one of my wasps managed to hit an illusion, enabling the cultist to spawn an icy dragon to chase me down. Luckily for me though, the cultist was already critically damaged at this time, and even his dragon guardian couldn't save him from defeat. With the cult gone, the Lunar Invasion began in my world, and as most of you could probably guess, the first pillar that I decided to go for was Nebula. This way, I'd be able to craft some new powerful mage weapons that would aid me with the other 3 pillars. Once the Nebula pillar was finally defeated, I collected up the valuable fragments and returned to my base to craft the new weapons. After taking out the next 2 pillars, I decided that I needed to make some final preparations for Moonlord before fighting them. First, I farmed up some gel that I would be able to use to craft asphalt. Then, I purchased a Blendomatic as well as some better wings from the Steampunker. With a good amount of asphalt crafted, I next began building a platform in the sky that I would use in my upcoming fight. With these preparations complete, I set off to take out the final pillar, and with its defeat, my fight with Moonlord was set in stone. Now, all that I had to do was wait. As the lunar boss arrived, I began to fire off some attacks at him, making sure not to damage the hands too much, and instead focus focusing on the main eye. Using visual cues, I was able to anticipate when he would fire his deadly laser, and I used this time to deal as much damage as possible. After repeating this pattern a few times, I was able to take out all 3 of the eyes at around the same time, releasing the true eyes of Cthulhu and exposing Moonlord's core. At first, my attacks on the core went pretty smooth, but after a bit of time, I was hit by a double beam fired by the true eyes of Cthulhu, taking my health down in an instant. And as if this wasn't enough, right after this deadly attack, I ran out of platform and was forced to turn around right into yet another damaging attack, leaving me barely alive with only 2 health remaining. Desperately running for my life, I continued to fire as many attacks as I could at the core, and by some miracle, I managed to avoid taking any more damage, defeating Moonlord after narrowly escaping defeat. As the credits began to play, I collected my prize, completing the challenge of beating Terraria without using any chests. If you're watching this video right after upload, I'm most likely streaming on Twitch right now, where I'll be hosting an open multiplayer game of Terraria. If you'd like to participate in this event, there will be a link to my Twitch channel in the description. And if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to be notified when I upload more like it in the future. I'm officially back from my semi-vacation that I took over the holidays, so uploads should return to a more normal pace going forward. And with these announcements out of the way, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you to Beav Notice Me Senpai and all my other patrons for helping make this video possible.